Sometimes
we
think
about
people,
and
their,
problems.
and
We
feel
that
life
is,
beautiful.
period.
Thank you. Now it's your turn. I'm going to invite you to turn to a neighbor near you and create a sentence between the two of you that doesn't have to be profound, doesn't have to be funny, doesn't really have to be anything. I just want you to experience what is it like not knowing what's coming next, and what you're relying on to create whatever you're doing is the other people that are alive and unknowable that are with you. All right, so please turn to someone near you, and you will take turns saying one word at a time until you create a sentence and someone says period. That's our sentence. All right, just a sentence. A lot of good, grammatically correct run-on sentences going on. Well, I heard a lot of sounds, so I know something was happening. Was that somewhat fun? Did any of you feel a little pressure to have it turn out a particular way? Yeah. How many of you had an idea in your head of where you thought the sentence was going to go, and then your partner just went and took it somewhere totally different? Yeah? You ever had that experience in life?
Yes.
Okay, are you really not awake enough yet? Have you ever had that experience in life?
Yes.
Oh, there are alive people. I'm glad to know. Emergence, right? Things never go exactly as we think they will. I had a prophetic, professional experience when I was 25 that mirrored the dynamics of this kind of improvisational emergence. One of the responsibilities of my position was to run a week-long, it was 5 days for participants and 7.5 for staff, but a 5-day statewide leadership program for high school students. And there was very little money, as you can imagine, in this nonprofit in the budget to run a program like this, so I was the only paid staff member. The rest were volunteers, and I was encouraged, and we had anywhere from 50 to 100 people in attendance, depending on the session. So I was encouraged, Erin, why don't you just reach out to last year's participants and staff and see if you can find about 10 adults and 20 youth who'd be willing to volunteer to be staff and run the program. Oh, okay. They're just gonna give up, like they're gonna come live in a dorm for 7.5 days with no pay, and they're gonna be awake from like 7 in the morning till 10 or later at night, and they're gonna show up, really? They're gonna do this? I was assured that every year there are adults who will even take vacation time to come to this event. I'd been assured that youth would take time off their scheduled work, that youth would take time off of their sports world or their family vacations to come to this thing called the Green Mountain Teen Institute. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that the whole crux of this thing I'd be working on for most of the year totally relied on people I'd never met before showing up to pull it off. And so I was supposed to entrust this to other people. It was the biggest sentence and the longest sentence I'd ever constructed with people I'd never met before. I couldn't believe I had no incentive to offer pay or really anything to have any sense of accountability in people doing the things that they said they would do or even just showing up to the event. needless to say, there was some fear and insomnia in the days leading up to the first time I ran this event. I couldn't imagine that it was going to work out, but I had to fake it till you make it. But the volunteers, they could imagine it was going to work out because they had taken the leap of faith that I was now taking in the years before when they had first been a participant, when they showed up and were separated from their friends and put into peer groups. When I asked at our staff training, what helped you feel comfortable and welcome? Like how did you help? How did anybody help break you out of the need to be cool? Like I still feel that need, but I definitely felt it when I was in high school. Amen? Amen. All right, you're with me. And they easily answered. They just said, the youth and the adult staff, they just modeled it for us. They broke the ice themselves. They led silly games by being silly. They got the groups sharing by sharing themselves. That they were friendly, they were welcoming, and eventually the participants felt comfortable to just be themselves. And they said that the staff, who were mostly youth, were really determined to break down cliques. Like they actively worked against the group formations to try to promote lots of cross-mingling so that there was a sense of shared community. And they even did it among themselves. What? I was thinking, really? Youth were leading that? That was not my experience in high school, of youth who were eagerly and enthusiastically working against the pressures to find a small group home and feel comfortable. That is still a part of adult life. And those pressures are hard. But they sincerely wanted to get to know people, and I saw it starting right off the bat at our staff training. Experienced staff welcomed the new staff. The new staff were eager to help be a part of this culture shift and creating warm and welcoming relationships. Did I say that I really couldn't believe this was going to happen? Because I really couldn't. I did not experience ever in my life before people being so open and enthusiastically breaking down barriers to connect with one another ever in my life. I didn't actually know this was possible. The whole sense of what is community, it's something for me that we sing about, it's something that's in songs, it's rarely an ongoing experience in my life. But I experienced it there, and it was led by high school students who were cool with doing it even when adults were around. And the youth staff, they came up to me, and I was still in disbelief, like, how's this thing gonna work? And they came up to me and said, and I was 25, and they came up to me and said things like, hey, are we still gonna do the warm fuzzy tradition? And I was like, what? I had read the thing, and I just thought, are you serious? Like, you're 17 or 18 years old? And they were like, of course we're gonna do the warm fuzzy, and are we gonna do the forking? And then I thought, they are really messing with me. Like, do they really? Okay, that makes more sense to me that they would say that. So warm fuzzies are actually, have you ever seen these things or heard this story? Where people wear necklaces with these yarn balls, and you compliment each other, and you give them a hug, and you give them a strand from your yarn ball, and everybody's running around doing this. That was one of their traditions, and some of them brought their old ones that had tons of yarn on, and they wanted to do it again. I don't know who these youth are. I didn't have in my story of photos that, but here's some youth showing you their love of it. And forking, as it turns out, is what you think it is. It's when you spell things out in the grass with forks, right? And the staff would do this on the last night so that when participants were coming to breakfast, they would see like GMTI 26, and it would just be a fun thing that they did. I was relieved to find out that's what it meant. I always said there shall be no addition or subtraction of life in any event that I run. Please help me with that. So high school was not a warm and fuzzy experience for me. Icy, sure. People being cool, yeah. Me trying too hard to be cool, oh yeah. I don't know that I really have ever given that up completely, but I didn't feel more comfortable in my skin, really, like at home with myself, until I was in my mid-20s, about the same time I started working with these high school students. But many of them were between 15 and 20 years old, and they just radiated this self-acceptance that allowed them to be generous with people they didn't know. And the fact that they were surrounded by other people who had had this experience just emboldened them to create this like fountain of kindness and welcome that I had never experienced before. And on youth staff, there were all kinds of kids. Here are 3 who worked with me. They made shirts. They were the youth co-coordinators with me eventually one year, and they each had shirts on that said to ask the other. But there were drama kids. There was a varsity starting quarterback. There was a guy who played didgeridoo. There were runners. There were swimmers. There were kids in band. There were self-celebrated and proclaimed nerds. There were shy kids. There were outgoing kids, and everyone in between. And having found some measure of belonging among one another and acceptance, they had this confidence and joy in just being themselves that they were readily able to share with others. I thought, wow, like what an amazing asset to have in your life while your frontal lobe is still developing. That took longer for me. I, on the other hand, entered this situation often like I do, a little skeptical. I'm not a big joiner, even though I was supposed to be creating a joining experience. I know this about myself. It's why I can resonate with people who are in the Intro to UU class who aren't ready to become members yet. It took me 7 years to join a church. Even though I pledged and would volunteer and do all this, I was still like, what is this about? But not these kids. I was scared a little bit of teenagers. Anyone ever had a fear of teenagers? I was scared of them before I really got to know them. I thought, oh, teenagers are so quick-witted and they're so willing to call you out. If you like say one thing and do another, uh-oh. And I was running a youth leadership institute, which meant how could it be about youth leadership if I was running it? I couldn't. I had to turn it over. I had to let support and train and give a vision to youth, but I had to let them be the ones who said the welcome in their own words, who set the behavioral expectations. Nobody cares if I want a subtraction, no subtraction or addition to life, but if they say that, then it actually matters, and they act in a way that carries that message. And I couldn't believe that they were gonna do that, because that's not what I would have done when I was in high school, but they did. And they carried this energy from the staff training into the first day to welcome participants. And by the end of the first night, after we'd done a ropes course and team building initiatives, you could see that people were warming up and shifting. The boys, especially boys who were sitting back, like not willing to look silly in front of anyone or share too much. I think the gender rules for boys of how closed up they're supposed to be really inhibited. But by the second day at lunchtime, it was like, who are these kids? This is a whole nother group of people than who showed up here yesterday. And by the final night at our no talent show, there were 2 guys and an adult who was a heavy metal aficionado, who was a drummer, who is known, his name was Josh, and he was known for saying that everything other than heavy metal is disco. He got up on the stage with battery-operated toys, with a drum kit, with 2 other boys on battery-operated guitars, and they played an amazing song together. Here's a picture of 3 people. The group, they're lip-syncing a song. Lori there is playing on a piece of wood for guitar. The guy has some sticks that he's drumming with, and someone, it looks like they have a broom handle off to the left, but that's their guitar. 2 girls went up on stage and 8 nerds. They just sat chairs down in total silence, and they just sat there and 8 nerds. And that was it. The kids were just laughing and laughing. There was a memorable story about softball and diarrhea and jokes and things like this. So there was clearly no talent. Everyone's in puppy piles, they're just laughing, and then the awards were given out for the act that had the least talent, and yes, the nerd eating won. I had made a film with some youth staff, and apparently we put too much effort in, so we failed. Oh. But that night, the staff went out and put the forks in the lawn. Peer groups gathered one last time to tell each person one at a time what they appreciated about each other. And then we all got together to share warm fuzzies. Here's a picture of one of the peer groups. And when the youth had left and the adults and the youth staff sat down for our closing circle, I just burst into tears. They were leaping from my head. I would be surprised if people didn't get wet, because I finally believed that people who said something were actually going to do the thing they said they valued. And I had never experienced that before, to that extent. The kindness and the care that they had modeled and encouraged, the countless individual improvisations that each person brought to the group to create that experience. I was a different person because they had showed me a community of people who were open to life, expecting to love. That one's hard for me. And prepared to serve. Maybe it's because of who I am, but I don't think humans form groups easily. I think many of us enter tentatively, and we feel alone in a crowd, even when we've been amongst the people for a while. And that the feeling of community that we may experience can be fleeting or momentary, arising and disappearing, even among people we've known for a long time. I believe that's why youth and adults took vacation time to come and be staff at this program. I think it's why there's an alumni Green Mountain Teen Institute Facebook page that I'm a member of. I think it's why almost 20 years later I'm still connected to some of the youth staff that I served with. People were expected to join in no matter what you looked like, no matter how you felt about it. People didn't say, oh, that person looks kind of withdrawn, I'll leave them there. They would say, that person is withdrawn? Well, let's go bring him some love. And they'd get a couple people and run over and bring him in. That's how we make community. It's by doing what Jennifer talked about last week, where we might recoil and notice it and then move towards. The youth, they offered their energy, their leadership, their presence. They led workshops, and for many of them, they functioned up in ways they had never done before. And they did it in front of their peers at a challenging time of human development, and they did it in front of large crowds. And we were all willing to take those risks together. I started the sentence, and then I handed the mic. And I was terrified. But it mattered to me that the program have integrity, that it wouldn't have integrity if I held onto the mic the whole time to try to make sure it became what I wanted. I had to let the mic go because the leader's development and learning was just as important as the participants' experience. And the improvisation we co-created together is what created the experience of belonging that to this day shapes my vision for beloved community and ministry. We built something together that's extraordinary, something that changed people's lives, how they show up, how they spend their money, where they go, what they think about groups, our sense of what is possible. And that has always stayed with me. Being a people who say yes to each other, say yes to our wider community, because we recognize that saying yes to each other and our community over and over and over again is our way of saying yes to love. Yes to the process of the universe that started billions of years ago, that moves in us still. When we welcome each other, when we say yes to each other, when we're goofy and making rainstorms together, when we're being real with one another, when we're being whole rather than just a well put together facade, that's when we shift people's sense of what's possible. It's what we bring to it. When we share ownership of love's enterprise, and we recognize that it's not going to happen if we don't step up and be the people who are going to do that, when we bring our gifts to it, our volunteering, our cooking, our teaching, our playing, our bell ringing, our pledges, our listening, our willingness to improvise with one another, It's when we enter and risk, trust and love and let go into this community. That's when we create this contagious spirit that is the best sermon we can ever offer as a community. A colleague of mine, the Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, said at General Assembly at the Sunday service in 2016, she said, in spite of what every congregational satisfaction survey says, we did not come here for the coffee. And we didn't even come for the great music. We don't even come for our awesome, excellent ministers. You don't. You come because we have a deep, aching need for an encounter with the holy. An encounter with the holy that crosses our borders and expands our hearts. We come to be part of something so much larger than ourselves. Today, we celebrate the gifts that we share in creating this community and showing up in snapping and building machines and computer wisdom, in playing music, in following a leader, and being willing to co-create. We celebrate all the gifts that we share in community that create the welcoming, the belonging, the life-changing, life-affirming yes, and. We celebrate what we create together we could not do on our own. Audre Lorde says, without community, there is no liberation. In the final class of our Introduction to Unitarian Universalism, which the third of 3 that happened this last Thursday, we listened to this sermon, a portion of it by Reverend Ladd. And in it, she goes on to also warn us not to act as if church is a short order menu, and not to act as if community is a product to be consumed on your terms, in your time, without ever making you uncomfortable or demanding a whole lot out of you in the first place. Whoa, right? That's kind of my ideal vision of community, actually, right? Like that I'm just going to be sitting in my pajamas and they're going to show up at my house and they're going to say, it looks really cozy in there. Can I join you? That it's going to be easy. That it's always going to work out. That it's never going to be frustrating. It's never going to be unclear. It's always going to be just timed right, and they'll have the perfect music, and I'll just love everything the minister says, and everyone will be welcoming and kind to me, and it's just all going to be like that's, if we're really living our faith, it will all be human. It will all be human. So what do we bring to that human enterprise? In the class, I invite people to write on a note card what they're longing for in the experience of a faith community. And then on the back, I ask them to write, what are you willing to commit to yourself to do to fulfill those longings? I have yet to find a time where my deepest longings, someone just walks up and gives them to me. It takes action on my part. Maybe you feel like you're still on day 1 or day 2 here in this community, wondering, is what she's saying really possible? Can the ice really be broken here? Can I really be all of who I am and have people meet me there? And maybe you're someone who just goes everywhere and you melt ice everywhere you go. You can't help it. You're on fire. And you're just always melting ice. And I know some of you. Well, may we each continue to find ways to say yes to love and to each other, to take risks and grow in ways that expands our hearts and the heart of our faith community and the heart of the communities that we intersect with. Ocean is the water's religion. Let it be ours as well. Let us be a people of liberation and love. Amen? Amen. P.S. Seriously, go talk to someone after the service you don't know. That's like a small step towards building. If we can build a strong community, then we can actually work together on things to create justice in the world. But if we have a hard time even saying hello to each other, and Nancy says in her sermon, if we have a hard time even deciding whether or not we want to be a part of this community or not, then we are never going to build the power and the shared resources to actually bring a prophetic voice of love into the world. So it doesn't just matter that you individually cross over your own nervousness to say hello to people like I feel. It matters because it's a step towards us building the capacity to actually bring forth a larger love between us, among us, and expanding out from us. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, let's sing.